Thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's wonderful to see all our colleagues and friends and all our friends from AFAPIS, and welcome. Beit Issie Shapiro is a non-profit organization in the field of disabilities. We are committed to social change, and our vision is to ensure an inclusive society. Everything we do touches on three core activities: developing replicable models, evaluating and disseminating these models, and influencing policy and changing attitudes. What has become apparent to us over the years from our experience is that most of the problems of a person with disabilities does not lie in the impairment itself, but rather it lies within the society within which the person lives. I think we've all been saying that today. Parents tell us about their feelings of rejection and hurt for their children when they go to the park or the mall and people try to avoid them. Students who are included in regular schools tell us about their deep sense of isolation with what's called inclusive education. People with intellectual disabilities have shared with us their rage that they cannot get information about their bank accounts without the approval of their guardianship. I'm not even talking about taking money out of the bank by themselves. So the biggest challenge is not on the service level. It is rather eliminating the social and psychological barriers on a societal level. So today I'll talk about how we deal with stigmas and negative attitudes towards people with disabilities. We use, you see this slide over there, our circles approach. And it's based on the belief that to make an inclusive society, one has to look at the person with disabilities as well as the interaction of the person within family context, the community, and the society with the cultural, social, and economic policies that surround the person. Any community-based change requires us to intervene on all these levels. So, some 15 years ago, we decided to tackle the issue of negative attitudes in a systematic and in-depth way. We first of all started reading the research that's done on attitudes, and we learned from the research that children close their social attitudes at the age of 14. The attitude that you have at 14 you generally take along with you in life. We also did our own research, and we looked at children as young as 4 to 5 years old, and we found that negative perceptions start developing at this very young age. We couldn't actually find tools to measure attitudes at such a young age, so we built tools ourselves, we validated them, and hopefully it will be used in other countries once we have published the research we have done. We also looked at the attitudes of teachers and parents. And so we designed our program and measured the change of attitudes before and after intervention. And the good news is that you can change attitudes significantly. It is an investment, and we need to invest in this if we want to have the full implementation of the CRPD. I would really like to say here a special thanks to Shosh Kaminsky, my colleague, put your hand up, Shosh, who is the Director of Community Work and the leader of all our community work. We have written articles about this in English and in Hebrew, and if anyone is interested in them afterwards, I can give them to you. So if we talk about changing attitudes, we have two main strategies. The first strategy is along the whole age spectrum, starting with kindergarten children, including youth and up to adults. So we work with different age groups nationally across the country. Our second strategy is to change attitudes with a geographical community, like we have done in Ra'anana in Israel, where we are placed, as well in Kalansoa, the Israeli Arab town not far from us. There we use our circles approach, our holistic approach, where we change attitudes on all levels within the community. So what are those dimensions that we believe have to be in programming that deals with attitude change? Programming has to be based, and is based on an understanding that attitudes have three basic components. First of all, the cognitive component, that is knowledge and information. The second component is the emotional component, how do people feel about other people? And the third component is behavior. Do different groups interact with one another? So when we want to change attitudes, we have to influence and use all these three components. So we have built a model we don't have much time to talk about it, but we have a model of intervention for each target population, for children, parents, professionals, policymakers. As you can see in that slide, it kind of goes out within the whole and from the individual to the society. And in each circle, we have structured programming that is adapted to that target group. We have developed kits of intervention for some of these groups, in order to make these replicable. So now I'd like to give you 2 live examples of programs that we've done. We set up, Beit Issie Shapiro set up the first accessible park in Israel. But what we learned very, very quickly is that physical accessibility is just not enough to enable children to play together. And it does not ensure inclusion. What is essential to work on is social accessibility. The park is just a physical platform for interaction, but without a change of community attitudes, inclusion does not happen. So we went into about 17 kindergartens in our city, and we worked with the kids, parents, teachers, and we brought them together in the park. We researched it, and there were very, very favorable results. We are now very excited that the government has adopted our model and is funding accessible parks as well as the social programming that goes with it. We also know that disability leaders are very important as the trainers. As you can see over here, I have to hurry on because Michael is being mean. And we have the youth leadership program. This is my second example. We do a year-long program consisting of 10 workshops. Then there are joint community projects with youth with and without disabilities. And then they teach their peers about stigma and how they are made in the schools and the community. And so that is another program that we have developed over time. Of course, working with the media is essential. We've heard about that today. I don't have much time to talk about that, so I'd like to get straight to best practices. What are the things that we have learned over the 15 years of working about changing attitudes? The first thing we've learned is that developing programs have all 3 components that I spoke about earlier. Trainers should be people with disabilities as they are models of success and inspiration. We believe that programs should be long-term and not a one-time exposure. We believe that direct interaction is essential. And in addition, it is important for certain children that there's a facilitator at the beginning of the inclusion program that can help integrate. Now, just kind of my last remarks is that it is not easy for the civil society, for a non-profit organization like Beit Issie Shapiro, to fund the issue of changing attitudes. It's not, donors are much more interested in developing services. But even in times when we have had to cut back, we have refused to cut back our programming on changing attitudes, as we believe that this is the core of our mission. And without doing that, we will not be able to take a step forward. I'm really proud to say that AKIM, which is a national parent organization for people with intellectual disability, did a national study about which are the most tolerant cities in Israel. And Ra'anana, the work that we have done, was chosen as the most tolerant city in the country, which means that it is possible. I'm pleased to say there are more and more NGOs today who are taking initiatives in this area, and we are especially delighted that we have our wonderful commissioner from Israel, Achia, he has picked up the baton and is complementing the work we do in the community by really changing the attitudes of the service providers. So we really go hand in hand, and we will make a difference together. So thank you very much.
Our last panelist is Gudy.